So as we kind of look at predictions for this game, I think when I look at this contest, it's look, our staff is all on the same page. It's we all predicted a Notre Dame win, but it's to varying degrees, and I think the varying degrees are kind of looking at it from the standpoint of there's still a little bit of uncertainty about who this Notre Dame team is. There's still a little bit of uncertainty of, okay, are they really going to be sharp? Is the offense going to finally get going? We've kind of talked about how they've scored 35 and 41 points the last two games, but this is a team averaging 38 points per game in the last two games, but the offense has yet to get to 30. And so, on its own, meaning without getting the ball at the 2-yard line to set up a score. Because I'm trying to think of the game against Syracuse. They actually scored 34 offensive points. They had a defensive touchdown, but one of their touchdowns on offense was a 2-yard drive where they blocked the punt. So, I mean, to me, that's an offensive touchdown technically, but it's not. It's not where they put a drive together. And, of course, last week you had a pick six in that game. You had a blocked punt that was returned for a touchdown, so your offense only scored 21 points. So you really haven't seen the offense step up. And I think as I look through our staff predictions, you see a lot of that. And I'll get to mine too, and Ryan will have his, but I'm going to kind of tell you where the rest of the Notre Dame staff or the Irish Breakdown staff is on that one. Vince D'Addario predicted Notre Dame to win 35-6. Sean Davis predicted Notre Dame to win 34-13, and Sean Stiers predicted a 38-20 win. And then you have Andrew McDonough, who picked a far more convincing win by picking Notre Dame to win 42-10. So we're all on the same page, and it just was about magnitude. And so when you kind of think about which team is going to show up tomorrow. By the way, the game's at noon on ABC. Notre Dame is a 15.5-point favorite. I think everybody, for the most part, agrees that the defense is going to show up. I think what you're seeing in some of those scores is there's still questions about, will the Notre Dame offense show up and be able to get its job done? And that's going to be the interesting thing. And I think this is going to be a very good test for the Notre Dame offense, which we talked about. But I'm going to dive into my prediction first, and I'm going to kind of explain how I see this game playing out. And my prediction is I predict Notre Dame to win 31-6. And I do think that this team is going to be focused. I do think this team is going to come out locked in. The reason I'm only predicting 31-6 is because even locked in, this team still has to show me that it can be a big play offense. And so my prediction of 34-6, I mean, I'm predicting 5 scores from Notre Dame. I don't think they're going to have many more possessions than that based on what we've seen. If Notre Dame comes out and runs the ball the way that they have in recent games, they're going to shorten the clock, and then Navy's looking to shorten the clock, and you have two teams looking to kind of reduce the tempo of the game, and that's going to play into a limited possession game. The exception could be is if Notre Dame's defense forces turnovers and a bunch of 3-and-outs. If that happens, then I can see Notre Dame scoring a lot more points because they just have better players. I also don't, because if I thought also that Notre Dame was going to be sort of a big play offense, and you think back to, the 2019 game when Notre Dame beat Navy back in 2019, they didn't have a ton of possessions in that game, but they just scored every time they had the football, but they scored quickly. And so they were able to extend possessions in that game because of that. They scored 52 points in that game, but if you remember, one of their touchdowns was a defensive touchdown. Paul Moala had a 27-yard fumble return. He picked off an option play. But their first drive was a long drive, 11 plays, 75 yards, and then their second drive was 2 plays and 73 yards. They went pretty quick on that second touchdown drive, and you had a 11-yard run by Lawrence Keys, and then a penalty, and then you had a 47-yard touchdown pass to Chase Claypool. I believe that was on a seam throw. Your next drive was 4 plays and 39 yards because you got a short field. The next series was 1 play, lasted 9 seconds. It was a 70-yard touchdown pass from Ian Book to Braden Lindsey. And so you look at that game, and they scored 38 first-half points because they had short fields and big plays. And then you kind of, you saw similar things in the second half. You saw a big play. Chase Claypool continued to kind of make plays in that game. I think he ended up with like 3 touchdowns in that game. But you saw a little bit longer drives from Notre Dame in that game, and that's why they didn't score a lot more in the second half. So if I thought that this team could be more of a big play offense, I'd go with more points. So that's just kind of where I'm at. So my 31-6 just comes from limited possessions for both teams that want to run the ball, and control the clock. I think Notre Dame will play well. I think Notre Dame will dominate, but unless they can rip off big plays or force a lot of turnovers, then I don't think they're going to score a ton of points. However, that dude doesn't necessarily agree with me.
I do not. And
Can I
Brian,
say this? I hope
yes.
you're right. As you're getting ready to say everything you're about to say, I hope you're right.
Well, I'm just saying I'm going to be in the box on Saturday, and I'm 1-0 with the team in the box. And the last game I went to, Syracuse scored what they scored against Syracuse 41, it was
41.
41-24, I believe,
Yeah.
right? So I'm banking here, Brian. I'll be very honest, because I know some people are going to look at my score prediction. They're going to say you predicted a big score against Marshall, and you're correct. You're correct. I predicted that one very incorrectly, as did most people in the general college football landscape, right? But I think that for me, what gives me confidence going into this football game is one, Notre Dame, the last two games, I think has really showed me that they can stack performances in a row where I become now more confident that this team is really turning that corner and taking that next step. I mean, the last 2 weeks, you beat a good Syracuse team 41-24. You beat a very good Clemson team 35-14. And I think that I do believe that this team is going to take care of business against a inferior opponent this weekend. So I picked 52-7. And I know that that sounds like a crazy number. I get it. And I understand why people are probably even shaking their head or rolling their eyes or whatever they're choosing to do over that score prediction. It's just, there's just something about Notre Dame now, the last couple games, that has me confident that this team is moving to that next step, that they are going to be able to go against a team that's inferior and just dominate this football game from start to finish. I do think that they could score a couple turnovers, because I think that for me, you look at Navy, and a triple option team is usually a very efficient offense that doesn't turn the ball over a ton. Well, they've turned the ball
Not
over
this
13
team.
times this year,
Yeah.
so they
Yep.
have a propensity to turn the ball over a little bit. So I think Notre Dame can steal a couple in that regard. I think that Navy is going to try to, load up against the run. I think Notre Dame is still going to have some success running the football, but I really do think that the passing game is just going to have a step up in this football game. So Notre Dame in the blowout, I have them here 52-7, a big score, but again, hope I'm right. Hope I'm right on this one.
Well, Ryan, I mean, your prediction is not far off from what Notre Dame's done in a lot of years of the series. And it's more about this unique nature of this year's offense. I mean, if you go back to 2010, Notre Dame lost to Navy. After that year of a 35-17 loss, they scored 56, 50, 38, 49, 41, 27 in a loss, 24, 44, 52, 34. So you're 52-7 is very much in line, especially if you think there's going to be turnovers, because as you mentioned, a lot of those Navy teams were not necessarily turnover-prone teams. The 2019 game got out of hand because of that. If you remember correctly, I think Khalid Kareem forced a fumble. There was another fumble they forced early in the game. They had a fourth down stop, and then of course Paul Mawala had the fumble, the pick the option pass off, return it for a touchdown. So the offense had big plays in that game, but they also had a touchdown from the defense and then two other drives that were set up by the defense. And that's how you got to 52, because 52 against Navy is an impressive feat when you consider the amount of limited possessions you're going to have. So we've seen that in the past where Notre Dame's been able to create stops, create big plays, and create turnovers, and it's led to a lot of points. My only thing was, and I was talking about this before you got on, is I can't just necessarily, for me, predict, they're going to turn it over a bunch, because this has not been a great turnover defense. They were last week, which was huge, but this hasn't been a great force a bunch of turnovers defense. Now, I'll say this. It's interesting that a team that struggled to turn the ball over so much in the first 7 games of the year has literally accounted for 2 direct touchdowns in the last 2 games off turnovers. And they've been much better at forcing turnovers and putting games away with turnovers. They've put the defense has put the last 2 games away with turnovers. You had the Marist interception off the Howard Cross tip against Syracuse when Notre Dame was going to win, but it's like, okay, if Syracuse can put a drive together here, this could get a little bit hairy down the stretch. And then, they're losing, they're beating Clemson 21-0. But as you and I both know, Clemson scores there early fourth quarter. Notre Dame's offense, they get a stop next thing you know, it could easily be 21-14 with 3 or 4 minutes left, and you never know what could happen then. And the defense puts it away. So they've done that, but it's just for me, I need to see that they're really a legitimate force to turnover team. If you're
Sure.
correct and they force 2 to 3 turnovers, I think your
Hmm.
score is going to be much closer to being accurate than mine.
Hmm.
There's no question about it, because I do think this team will put the ball in the end zone if they force turnovers, especially if it's turnovers on short fields, right?
Right.
Like if they're forcing turnovers at the 25 going in, okay, all right, that's a punt,
Hmm.
But that's going to be the key to this game. But the other thing that's going to be important too, Ryan, is I could see them scoring a lot more points without forcing 2, 3, 4 turnovers if they could find a way to generate big plays. That's the unknown for me. Is can this team find ways to get a Braden Lindsey open on a deep route? I mean, look, Braden Lindsey scored a 70-yard touchdown pass, ran right by a Navy defense that was from a top 25 team, but I'm supposed to believe he's not good enough to do 3 years later to do that against a Navy team that's 3-6, right? That's what I'm supposed to believe,
Yeah.
because it's a Braden Lindsey problem apparently. So if they can find that, then sure. And that's what we
Hmm.
talked about in the keys to victory yesterday. We need to see that, but in my prediction, I'm just not predicting it till we see it. But I sure hope we do. I really hope that we do.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, Brian. I mean, I think there's going to be opportunities for big plays. To your point, right? Like, I mean, it's going to be tough for Navy just to handle the speed that Notre Dame has at wide receiver, and I think that a interesting conversation, and I know it's not like super groundbreaking, is that Notre Dame should be able to get a lot of time for Drew Pine in the pocket against
Mhm.
this defense. I mean, Jacob Bursich, I know is a decent little player as a defensive end, but they don't really have one-on-one winners as pass rushers. Like that's not really what they have in their arsenal. So I think they'll be able to create some time to throw the football. I think they'll get some guys open. At that point, it's just about can you capitalize, right? Like we haven't seen them capitalize a ton this year, but I guess I'm just banking on a couple of those big plays and Notre Dame gets rolling a little bit. But I really hope that either way, I would be happy with either one of our outcomes because for me,
Mhm.
it's you put a stamp on a team that you should have dominated and you did, right? So like at the end of the day, as long as Notre Dame dominates this football game and it's never a doubt and they don't take their foot off the gas, I'll be happy. The final score is just arbitrary at that point for me. I expect Notre Dame to win convincingly. It's more about how they get to the final score than what the actual final score is for me.
That's where I'm at. I mean, my 31-6, Ryan, I'm not upset by. I'm not.
No,
I mean, look, would I like more? I mean, would I like 38-6, 41-6, 52-3?
sure.
That kind of thing. Would I like that kind of score? Because you're what, 52-7 was yours, correct? Would
Correct.
I like something like that? Sure, I would love that. But 31-6 is a dominating performance. I mean, it's the second year in a row you've held Navy under 10 points. That's nothing to scoff at.
Yeah.
Where I would be a little concerned is if it's like a 24-3, a 21-10,
Yeah.
something like that, where the offense just really struggles to move the football. My prediction comes from I think Notre Dame's going to run all over Navy, but it's going to be exactly how it's been all year: 15-yard gain, 8-yard gain,
Right.
10-yard gain, 12-yard
Not
gain,
not
6-yard gain.
explosive, just
Right.
yeah,
So that's going
right.
to be 8, 9 play drives, and they're going to eat a lot of time off the clock. I mean, I could see this happening, Ryan. I could see I could see Navy starting off with the ball, going on a little 4-minute drive and not getting anything. Notre Dame stops
Mhm,
them, forces a punt, turns it over, turnover on downs. Notre Dame gets the ball, their own 35,
mhm,
and turns out a 6-minute drive. And then Navy gets the ball back and puts another 5-minute drive together. Notre Dame gets the ball back, goes down and scores another touchdown on a 10-play drive. And next thing you know, Navy gets the ball back with 2.5 minutes left, and they eat up the clock. And Notre Dame's third possession, they're taking a knee. I mean, I could see that in this game. I mean, it's not inconceivable to see that. And that's partly where the 31-4 comes from. It's for me, Ryan, and I think we're on the same page here. It's more about I want to see them playing with fire. I want to
yep,
see them playing focused. I want to see them playing hard, and I want to see them kind of looking at Navy like you're standing between us and our goals,
mhm,
and that's not okay. And
yep,
we're gonna punish you for it. And that's what I want to see from this team. Whether it's a 31-6, 52-7, or anything in between, that's what I'm going to care more about than necessarily the final score of the game. And that's where we get to the whole point of
right,
you and I are both process driven people. I could also
yeah,
see a game that's 52-7 that I'm not necessarily as impressed by. You know, the
Sure.
defense does its job for it, gets a couple of scores, punt block for a touchdown, gives the offense a bunch of short fields. And, like the 44-21 game against UNLV, you and I both came out of the game like, that was ugly. Like, I'm not happy about that game. So it's not so much the score, it's how you got there. And I think you nailed that with that comment is it's how you get there is going to be the big key of this game.
For sure. Yep.